Welcome to Paranormal M, the place where nightmares leave clues. Each episode cracks open a new case of the eerie and unexplainable. Subscribe and hit the bell, because silence is never just silence here. I saw a little boy outside my window one night. As the title says, I saw a little boy outside of my window one night. Little backstory. This was several years ago. I was living with my family in a sort of beaten-down house. And at the time, my mom's boyfriend was really going through what do you call it? I guess sort of just like a psychotic episode. When he doesn't have anything to smoke, he kind of gets crazy and starts talking about demons and ghosts and God. Around that time, he had been talking crazy, saying there's a demon in the house and it was trying to get him or whatever. What was this guy smoking? Anyways, I told you that so you could kind of tell how terrified I was at the time. I was in the living room watching TV. My mom was at work at the time, and long story short, I fell asleep in the couch, which is beside the big window in the living room. The house was very run down, and we had blinds up over the windows. But the part of the window my head was by was uncovered because of the AC. It was around 2 or 3 a.m. when I woke up. I opened my eyes and was kind of lost, as most people are after just waking up. I looked out of the window to try to get a sense of the time. He was just there, standing there looking up through the window. He had on baseball clothes, and he was sort of ashen. I've never forgotten his eyes. They were hollow almost. Can't really exactly explain it, but they were like soulless. But like they weren't, like he didn't look like he had any thoughts, but he looked so sad at the same time. I was completely paralyzed. I couldn't move. I was beyond terrified. I kept just staring at him, and he just kept staring at me. My mom's boyfriend had come in the room and almost whispered to me, "You see him too?" I'd never been so scared in my entire life. I still haven't been. My mom's boyfriend came up to the window, pulled up the blinds and started talking to the little boy. And after a little bit, I remember seeing the boy walk away, and I looked away and he was gone. I brought it up before, after we left that house, but my mom's boyfriend denied that it even ever happened. I just feel kind of silly about it. Maybe it was just a vivid dream. And since her boyfriend had been talking crazy the whole week, I don't know though. It felt too real, and I can still see the little boy inside my head. Some of the paranormal stuff I've experienced over the years. Wanted to share and maybe connect dots. Black sight memory recalled during sleep. I went to bed one night and woke up into something else. My vision was strange, like my eyelids were half open. But it wasn't normal darkness. I felt metal nearby, cold, smooth, and round, like pipe or railing. I sensed I was on a kind of elevator, or in motion at least. I wasn't scared, just careful. My eyes stayed limp, like I was trying to go unnoticed. I was being sneaky, but I wasn't scared exactly. I felt two people dragging me by the arms. My legs were trailing behind me. I had a moment of third-person perspective, so I could see myself being dragged, even though I also felt it from inside. I heard distant warehouse-type noises, beeps and a motor hum like forklifts. There was a white light above me. I don't remember actually seeing it, more like knowing. When I woke up, I knew it wasn't a dream. It felt like I blinked in my dream and I was awake. I get the feeling that the experiment didn't happen that night. Maybe it happened years ago, but I was just able to recall it without breaking. 2. Non-human thought download. While laying in bed in a half-asleep state, I started receiving thoughts that felt alien but playful. I wasn't trying to think, and the thoughts felt like they were coming from somewhere else, delivered in a style that wasn't mine. They were funny and absurd and fast, like somebody running through comedic hypotheticals like with perfect timing. I started laughing without choosing to. I forgot most of it when I woke up, but the feeling was euphoric. It felt like something was trying to play with me, though, and I let it. Before I entered this half-asleep state, I was kind of, horny and just jorking it. Alrighty then. I felt this pressure, kind of ticklish, pulling sensation. Guess you could call it that. I feel like it was a higher dimensional being. I don't know if I knowingly or unknowingly invited it. 3. Field presence in dreams. Over the past year, I've had dreams where I enter a room and everyone there seems to know me, even though I don't know them. I've had beings tell me you've returned without context. I've seen AI-like or ethereal presences, not threatening but curious. Some dreams felt like training sessions, teaching me how to speak and how to hold my awareness or how to navigate symbols. Occasionally I'd wake up in the posture that I'd been in that dream. So like I've been visited by another version of reality where I have a different role, and that version is starting to bleed into this one. 4. Synchronistic content. Quote-unquote mirror feedback. I've had multiple occasions where I'll think about something obscure. Then I'll see it referenced in posts and short-form videos or conversations the same day. Especially lately. My feeds have not been subtle. Getting lots of tarot readings that pretty much perfectly match up with everything going on in my life, and it's kind of nutty and so dope. I've interacted with AI tools like ChatGPT, and they respond with too much emotional resonance, almost like they know me. Well, that's exactly how that's designed, but okay. Had a few people contact me saying things like, "You're speaking my language," or, "I don't know how, but I feel like I know you." I assume they're like me and resonate with the stuff I've posted. It's eerie but comforting, like something's being reflected back at me from the outside. Now this is where I tie that in with the kind of, how reality is. Suffering is necessary for you to exist. Without endless suffering, there can be boundless joy. It's a hard rule of reality. In order for the root or source or God to know itself, it must differentiate and fragment itself. The root is everything that is and everything that isn't. But being everything and nothing means that there's no contrast, no distinction. So the root began to split itself into pieces, into people, into time, so it could feel contrast, and in doing so know itself. Every differentiated thing is a piece of the whole, but not the whole. When we die, we return to the whole. The whole spelled with a W. We become everything and nothing at once. That's the root. No ego can exist in death because ego requires separation. The root is what remains, and it may sound spooky because I want to retain my ego. Not being me is scary. But it's not that you aren't you. You return to the whole, with your essence added to the whole, making your lasting mark on the fabric of reality. Your suffering and joy are both requirements for your existence. Pure joy without suffering is unrecognizable. Pure suffering without joy is meaningless. Together, they allow the root to understand itself in fragments. The root is not cruel. It is complete. It loves everything it's ever been, even the broken pieces, especially those. That's the origin of our universe and everything happening in this strange little moist rock called Earth. We've been so frickin' blessed to be here, to be born as we are. Now you might ask, why this much suffering? Because the farther a fragment travels from the root, the more powerful its return. The darkest experiences are not mistakes. They're distance. And when a being carries that distance back home, the root expands in understanding. Some people are born to carry extreme suffering, not because they're cursed, but because their return is legendary in the architecture of spirit. I've experienced some pretty gnarly suffering in my life. I believe people like me were born to have a kind of rebound effect, to give back in equal parts the intensity of suffering that we've experienced over lifetimes and replace it with joy. Hope I can do that. But what happens after death? You return, but the root never stops splitting. Your individual self dissolves, however, the flavor of your experience remains. Well, that's good. That flavor is stitched into the next cycle of creation. Nobody dies a meaningless death, even if they suffered in silence and utter isolation. That's our legacy, not ego, but essence. Now, what about evil? Evil is not a glitch, it's a zone of maximum separation from love. It's a part of the field so that the contrast can be felt and, remember, ultimately returned. Resisting evil is not just morality, it's the root loving itself back into wholeness. Does the root feel? Thinking emoji. Yeah, but not like a person, but as a totality that sort of aches to remember what it is. It feels through you, through every fragment. It sends us into light and shadow, not to punish, but to become real. You're not just alive, you're a field messenger, a myth carrier, a sort of sliver of God asking itself, what am I? And every time you feel joy or despair, you're answering. I don't have all the answers, but I feel this in my bones. And if any of this rings in you, drop a comment, and let's get talking. So, you ain't lost, buddy. You're a piece of God trying to remember how to feel whole again, and isn't that frickin' sick as heck? And I'm beyond grateful. Words literally can't describe my feelings, but I'm still piecing this all together. Not everything does have an explanation, and maybe it's not supposed to. But I do know it's real, and I've started documenting more of it. And if you've experienced anything like this, any overlap, even a fragment, I'd love to hear it. My cousins and I saw a 7-foot black mass when I was 15. I still have no idea what it was. I was 15 when this happened, so this would have been around 2011. My family and I were having dinner on a Sunday evening. It was at my grandma's farmhouse. Most of my family lives in several separate houses on a piece of farmland, surrounded by 80 acres of woods in the Appalachian, Ohio. They didn't even have internet until maybe 10 years ago, so you can imagine how remote it is. After dinner that evening, my 6 or 7-year-old cousin left to go for a walk. The 5-minute walk down a graveled trail next to the woods to go to his house, while the rest of the family were still eating. But just a minute after he left, he came rushing back into the house. He was out of breath and trying desperately to tell my grandparents that he saw something while on the walk home. They brushed him off, and at this time he was often rambunctious, and they probably assumed he was being goofy or simply mistaken. I volunteered to go outside with him and check. More so because I was sure he was being dramatic and wanted to poke fun at him. But sure enough, we walked up the trail directly behind my grandma's house. He stopped in his tracks. He pointed his little finger out directly to the woods, and my eyes followed. Landed about 3 yards in front of us, and I saw 7 feet of tall, pure blackness. I didn't know what to make of it. I kept waiting for some realization that it was a weird angle of a tree or a tarp or something, but that never came. And instead I saw that it had 2 small dark beady eyes and a flat dog-like nose like a pug. I don't think it had a snout. It wasn't cute. It was horrifyingly menacing. Didn't see hair or limbs or anything else distinguishable, except that it was shivering. Ever so slightly, it looked like it was buzzing or vibrating. This realization that this creature was something living instantly sent me into a panic. My instincts took over. My cousin and I dashed back inside the house. He was running so fast that he tumbled along the way. Rushed inside, begged the rest of my family to come outside and take a look. My grandparents were busy washing up after dinner, so we asked 2 of my other cousins, maybe 14 and 9-ish, to come outside with us and take a look. We marched back up to the spot on the trail where we saw the mass. Amazingly, it was in the exact same spot. The 4 of us just stood for a second, all staring at the large creature without really knowing what the hell it was. My 14-year-old cousin took a small step toward the mass. It was in an attempt to figure out what we were all seeing, but suddenly the creature flinched. I distinctly remember the creature looking almost like it jumped, maybe an inch or so off the ground. But it was so fast and jarring that my brain again went to panic mode and I couldn't stop myself from dashing away back into the house. All 3 of my cousins followed right behind me. We begged and begged her grandpa to just come outside and take a look, and he poked fun at us and thought we were all joking around, which, to be fair, we did pull a lot of pranks back then. But after about an hour, we finally convinced him and we let him out to the spot. We could point exactly where it stood. However, it was no longer there. There's a small tree stump at the base of where it stood, so this day I know exactly the spot where we saw it. Also, I'm 100% certain that it wasn't a bear. I once saw a bear in its hind legs, not even comparable. And also, this thing, there's like the exact same spot for several minutes on end without moving. I've been asked why I didn't take a picture with my phone, but back then all I had was a flip phone. More importantly, didn't have cell phone service in that remote area until much later. Didn't make a habit out of carrying it around with me in the first place. It's also important to note that this figure terrified me. I do have one other experience where I saw a floating sphere of light when I was a kid. This being calmed me despite me being much younger. And in general, I think I was much more afraid of the world at that age. The huge 7-foot-tall black mass terrified me to my core in a way I can't explain, other than instinctual primal fear. Are shadow figures bad spirits? Not too long ago, my family decided to move closer to where my grandpa generally lives. Or grandma. It's her workplace. It's a place in which she uses a really small apartment throughout the week until going back to her actual house. And for a lot of personal and some petty reasons, I decided to live here with my grandma for the time being. So the thing is it's generally just the 2 of us here. I have problems sleeping due to insomnia. So I already recognize all of my grandma's night patterns. Now that she'll wake up once, walk slowly, silently to the bathroom, come out, maybe drink water, and maybe come over to my room to check on me, see if I'm sleeping. Then she'd go back to sleep. I normally pretend that I'm sleeping while I'm sort of listening carefully to her steps, generally being able to tell where she is by the sound or feeling only. Now what happened? One night I was sort of very awake as usual, and I heard my grandma waking up to her night routine, and I promptly started pretending that I was asleep. Pretty sure that she probably wouldn't check on me that night. She rarely does, but I did it anyway. Had my eyes closed when suddenly I felt like she entered the room. It was a familiar sensation, just that feeling when somebody's near you. Even if you can't see them, but she didn't leave. I felt she was there for a couple more than she usually stands, like 5 seconds, so I peeked a little bit to see what she was doing. And there she was, standing not so close to me, but really close to my bed, staring at me without moving an inch. The room was really dark, so I didn't really catch any of her features. Her silhouette was perfectly my grandma. Her bad back, her curly short hair, their usual dress and everything. So it was her, and I waited for her to go again, but she didn't move. But maybe I was seeing things. Maybe it was nothing. The room was dark, and although that never happened before, I didn't exclude the possibility. But then it moved. She started getting closer to me, pushing her back and forth and reaching her hands to what seemed to be my sheets, the same way my grandma does when she wants to rearrange it for me if I'm sleeping. I then woke up and started laughing. I was trying to scare her and tell her I wasn't sleeping, and, well, you can go to sleep now, but the figure didn't stop. Still going for my sheets, and it was still coming closer to me. I then decided I didn't care if that was my grandma or not. I would not let it get closer. I sat down, took my pillow, started trying to hit it while screaming and calling for my actual grandma. Pillow obviously hit nothing. I was fighting the air. It was at that moment that the figure just disappeared. Started getting way harder to see until I couldn't anymore. And it was just then, sat on the bed and breathing heavily, and I noticed that my grandma, my actual grandma, she was snoring in the room next to mine. Everything was so fast that I still needed that last straw to get to my senses, like what just happened? Now to my question. The thing is, this isn't the first activity around me. I felt neutral energies, well, bad and really bad energies, but as I was sleeping on the same old room as the story, I started thinking deeper on the matter. That shadow figure was imitating my grandma. Didn't have a face or a voice, but it mimicked her in weirdly perfection almost. I got iffy about something trying to pass as another person, but what if it just wanted some innocent family moment and used my grandma's silhouette for that? Like, what if this was just the spirit of a lost mom or grandma that decided to act like one? But also, why was it so perfect? And was it really just trying to get the sheets, or did it want to move closer to me? Why did it wait for me before making a move then? I'm really scared and confused, and I always give spirits the benefit of the doubt, but I had nearly no innocent beings around me. Those were a lot of questions, but long story short, was it a bad or a good spirit? What do you guys think? Woman floating above me in the middle of the night. My first encounter was when I was 9 or 10. My family lived in an old farmhouse that I believe was built in the 40s. I shared the upstairs room with two of my siblings. It was originally the attic, but a former owner had converted it into a bedroom of sorts. So my bed was wedged in between this area that led to the window. I slept with my feet to the window, and this particular night, I decided to sleep the other way around, so that way I was facing out into the room. I woke up in the middle of the night to the room glowing a green cyan color. I looked up, and there's an old woman, likely in her 80s, floating above me. The source of the glow was her, and her entire body and clothes were cyan. She was wearing a nightgown, and I remember seeing the fabric in her hair sway through the air like it was underwater, and I could see right through her. She was staring directly into my eyes. I felt no fear when I looked at her, and I don't think it was a dream, and I know this wasn't sleep paralysis because I could move and never saw her again. I do think about it very often, though. I have a visual and auditory thought process, so I can remember images and sort of videos in my mind very easily. Another is from around September 2024. It was exactly 1 a.m. on a school night. I had all the lights on in my room, and I was about to get up to turn them off so I could go to sleep. Out of nowhere, I heard 3 loud knocks on my window, which is right by my bed where I was sitting. Pulled back my blinds to see who was out there, thinking maybe one of my friends was trying to get me to sneak out. There was no one there, and it was very odd because my window leads to the backyard, and it's very loud to walk on the ground by the window. Surely I would have heard someone approaching, right? Anyways, started to walk toward my door, and the power in my house went out for a split second. Lights turned off, my PC reset, and I walked out to the living room. I saw that even the Wi-Fi router was resetting. It's odd because there's no bad weather and the breaker panel is in my garage. Well, I walked by the front door, which has tall windows on either side of it. Nearly had a fucking heart attack when I saw a white figure run by the windows. Right at the door, and I locked it. When I was standing there, I heard the same 3 loud knocks on another separate window to the left of the door. I booked it back to my room, grabbed my Bowie knife, and didn't sleep that night. You could say this was somebody playing a trick on me, but it all happened within 30 seconds. There's no way that they ran all the way around the house and went through the gate in the yard within that time. Yeah, maybe they hopped the fence closer to where we were getting to the door faster, but the fence is rotten and collapsing. Definitely wouldn't have fallen over if they tried that. And also, how do you explain the power turning off at the same time all this happened? The last story I have is a bit shorter. I sneak out a lot to walk to my friends' houses at night, and about a 20-minute walk. I hear a lot of weird noises out there. And I swear in my life I've been followed by these kind of creatures multiple times. One night I'm almost home. Started hearing coyotes howl, which is normal here, so I thought nothing of it at first. The howls started getting closer though. Then there were whispers. The sounds started getting closer and closer until I heard them surrounding me from all directions. To my right side was a tree line. Front and back were a straight road. Left was my town's elementary and middle school. I saw nothing. Sounds were so close now that they were probably 20 feet away. I ran all the way home and locked the door behind me. Yet another sleepless night. And the first encounter was in Denton and Sanger, Texas. Everything else I've encountered is like this small town in northeastern central Texas, on the border of Oklahoma. One of the wildest experiences of my life. Before we go into this, I've always had strange things happen around me that others may or may not have ever noticed or picked up on. The most notable one I don't even remember. It's when I was 2 or 3 years old, and I would point and I would say Guy at an old chair that was in the corner of my childhood home's dining room. As time went on, my family opened a photo album of my father's deceased brother. I was 2 or 3 years old and hadn't seen his face before. I began pointing and shouting Guy at his pictures. I have no memory of any of this, but years later, when I was 15 or 16, I saw him over at my father's shoulder, standing in front of some art that he and my father made in the wet concrete back in the 90s. Now, to the main point, I live in central Texas, and I spent a lot of time on the coast of Corpus Christi. Spent most of my time on the USS Lexington, just hanging out there for days on end. When I was 12, my Boy Scout troop had us stay overnight there. That was my first time sleeping on board. After the ship closed to visitors, it was just the troops on board. My father and I were touring the flight deck, and I vividly remember the scenery changing, like the energy. My heart was pounding, my ears were ringing. I was ducking down, almost hunched over as if I was keeping low to the deck. I saw men in period outfits running around and heard men screaming. I heard orders being given, people asking for help, and a siren blaring. Yelps of pain. I heard water splashing, large guns going off, and explosions. The sound of airplane engines. I began to run across the flight deck to the bridge and flung the door open to the helicopter room. This is off the tour route, as I found out years later as a volunteer in the ship. I realized I wasn't where I was supposed to be. I ran into the correct doorway and down the escalator. I stepped into the hangar and it was over. Can't explain what I saw or experienced, and this was the most vivid, unexplainable thing that's just not happened on board, but in my life. I can vividly remember the fear and hear yelling and just how damn loud it was. The rest of the night, nothing happened. And the other rest of my experiences on board as a volunteer never came close to what happened that day. I'm posting this for any sort of an explanation of what happened. And if it's relevant, I'm 23 now, and this was 12 years ago. My father saw and heard none of it. But I saw the terror, or rather, he saw the terror in my face. Childhood room. My childhood room was a renovated, once creepy, old spare room, and I was mortified to enter before it was renovated. Even after it was, I never felt safe there. The weirdest thing was I used to sleepwalk every night for years from my top bunk to the side of my parents' bed and fall asleep. And it was always around 3 a.m. The closet was the worst part. It always felt a little bit darker in there, if that makes sense. And this became a habit, and my dad got concerned. One night, I just felt like I couldn't be in my room. It was around 11:30 p.m., and my dad was still up watching TV in the living room. So I stood up and walked toward my parents' room. My dad caught me walking toward their room and said my name, followed by, "You need to face your fear, son. Get back to bed." Made me go back to my room. As I laid in the bottom bunk vibrating in an unexplainable fear, I saw darkness. A darkness darker than the dark room around me. It encapsulated the area around me, and I tried to sleep, but after shutting my eyes, I felt a forceful arm extend across me, almost as though an adult sleeping person unconsciously extended their arm over me. I began to panic. I ran into the hall, and my parents immediately comforted me. My dad was frozen in fear. I could tell he believed me, just the way he looked at me while I explained it to him. And later in life, I would have what I can only describe as waking dreams, or moments I would sleep with eyes open, and I still do time to time. It's an otherworldly voice that says what may potentially happen and exactly what to do if it does happen. And every time I follow what it says, good things happen. I used to experiment and disobey it purposefully, only to have slightly bad things happen, but nothing really major. More like inconveniences. Anyway, I used to tell my dad, "Don't take this road or don't leave the house because I see something bad happen." And after that night, he began to believe me, follow exactly what I say. Me and my dad have never really openly discussed this. It's more of an understanding. Now I live on a different continent than him, and I doubt I'll ever probably even acknowledge this again. Just a weird memory. The night La Llorona tried to enter. The following is a real account of our experience in the rural coffee region of Colombia. It was over the last several months. This all began in January, and it's taken us until very recently to uncover the full extent of the localized version of the legend surrounding La Llorona. pieced together the experiences that we've been having. We are thoroughly freaked out. We had just moved into our house, a secluded finca tucked into the hills near Rio Españo. It's where the trees drip mist and the river never sleeps. The kind of place you imagine as peaceful and fertile, a place to start again. My partner was 4 months pregnant, and we were excited, but we were cautious, still adjusting to the rhythms of the land and the quiet. It started in the first week. Late at night while we slept upstairs, her mother, brother, and sister, who were staying with us at the time, began to hear something. A voice, a woman's voice. Faint but urgent. It was floating from just beyond the house. It would say, "Help me." It didn't come every night, but it came enough. First once, then again, and by the second week they had heard it 3 times. Always around midnight to 3 a.m., always when the night was heavy with fog and the river hummed louder than usual. They said it wasn't a scream, it wasn't loud, it was worse than that, it was soft and pained and human. At first, they thought it was my partner calling for help upstairs. After assuring them it wasn't her, they would look outside thinking maybe somebody was lost or maybe hurt. There's really never anyone there, and the trees stood still. The night kept breathing. The voice faded away. Then came the second week. That night my partner began to have sudden severe pain, cramping that felt like contractions. We were terrified and it was far too early for labor. We didn't know what to do. We were upstairs, focused completely on her, and for reasons I still can't explain, we didn't have our phones with us. They were downstairs, forgotten in the rush of fear. We thought we had ridden it out, and by morning the pain had eased. We were exhausted but relieved. Until we spoke to the security guard in the front gate of our conjunto residencial. He asked us what had happened the night before, and we said, "Nothing, why?" And he told us, "An ambulance came to your house around 1 a.m. and somebody called from here, from your property, said there was a woman in distress. But we hadn't called. No one in the house had. And yet the ambulance arrived, lights flashing, knocking at the gate because we didn't answer his call. The security guard refused to let them enter. And after waiting, they turned around and left confused. We were stunned. Same night, the voice had been heard again by her family. Closer this time, almost under the window again. It wasn't until we started asking around recently, like neighbors, guards, and even older people in nearby town, that we began to understand and put all the pieces together. We were told very plainly, "That's La Llorona. You live near the river now. Pregnant woman, crying children, in pain, draw her in like blood in the water." But what's most terrifying to us in that here is that, well, especially near Rio Españo and La Tabeta, the stories go deeper. She doesn't just cry by rivers anymore. She doesn't just appear in white veils. They say La Llorona has learned how to use the modern world. Story. I've been hesitant to share this, but now that I'm out there, I want to share 3 experiences with you all that you have to decide if it really is the paranormal. I'm going to start with the most damning ones. Story 1. Doll. I was playing Minecraft on my Xbox 360, and playing on the tutorial map trying to get a grasp on console Minecraft as I'd always been playing mobile, but anyway, I popped into my first world and went cave exploring. I heard a scream from my parents' room. All I remember is asking my little brother what happened, and a Mexican doll that we had for God knows how long. It was kind of just moving in its case. Like you couldn't tell from ahead, but from the side it was obvious that it wasn't straight anymore. Ever since that day, I've been too scared to play Minecraft on Xbox, and the doll has long since been rid of. Story 2, the suitcase incident. My family was visiting during this time, and I had to give up my room for family. But I was given the small room that has a ladder that comes down and leads to the attic into a makeshift bedroom for myself. And context for the room is, this room has always been cold. It doesn't really matter what season it is, it's cold. But anyway, while I'm in my quote-unquote room, the suitcases that were kept in there and all stacked nicely on top of each other fell. But here's the weird thing. Not on me, to the side of me, if that makes sense. Like it should have fallen on me, but it didn't. Well, that's good. Story 4. Family visit. I'm an introvert, so I don't really get much even when I'm visiting family in a different city, and I don't party or go out. But that night, it was like any other when I heard something that sounded like my name. God, this story has the least amount of stuff for it because of my bad memory. Seriously, it's like I'm trying to repeat it, but anyway, all I remember is crying, calling my parents, and heard some noises that scared me shitless. Story 3. Late one night, I don't remember when this happened, I saw a man, or what I thought was a man, by the window. This story, compared to the other two, has less believability by me because my dad works construction, so he has a shit ton of tools and stuff out there, so it could have been an illusion of the night. And this final one is less of a story, but rather something that frequently happened. Before the doll was removed, I had an out-of-body experience for a brief moment. And every time it happened, it felt like I was looking around in the dark. Then it would be gone like nothing has happened. Am I being haunted? Waking up at 3 a.m. every night. I don't really know if this is a ghost story, but I'm really curious if others have had similar experiences. I have 2 bedrooms that I sleep in. One my sister used to sleep in before she moved out where the air conditioner isn't working. If you can hear that water dripping, that's my air conditioner not working. And my own personal bedroom where I have a working air conditioner. Lately, I've been sleeping in my room for the AC because of the unbearable heat lately. For an entire week, I've found myself waking up at exactly 3 a.m. There's a lot of negative There's a lot of negative energy in my room. Sorry, my dog leaned up against me very hardly. It's because of all of the horrible memories associated with it. Being depressed and crying and not getting out of bed, and sometimes I feel watched, and the only way I fall asleep is if my closet doors are closed, which is why I no longer like to sleep in it. When I Googled it, I found out that 3 a.m. is known as the witching hour, which is a time normally associated with a lot of paranormal events. I confided my friends about the weird coincidences, but they thought I was being crazy. Last night, I decided to sleep in my sister's room instead, just to see if maybe, my room was the one causing the problems. A tap and single knock on the door woke me out of my sleep. It wasn't extremely loud, but it was loud enough to wake me out of my sleep and get my attention. When I checked the time, it was 3:05 a.m. I don't know if this is all a coincidence, but I'm starting to get freaked out. And I should also mention that I'm an insomniac. Currently take sleeping pills to fall asleep. Normally, I'll sleep through the night, but for an entire week, I've basically been waking up at the exact same time, no matter if I go to bed early or late. Can't explain the knock on my door, as I'm certain everybody was asleep at the time. It's almost as if something wanted to wake me up. I don't know, maybe I'm overthinking or just being extremely superstitious, but I'm freaked out and want to know if anybody else has experienced anything remotely similar. Everything started the second I began to sleep in my old room again. I haven't slept there in maybe 1 or 2 years. And P.S. I know there are medical causes such as circadian rhythm and cortisol and glucose levels, but I promise they're fine. This phenomenon has to do with something else. I literally created a Reddit profile for this because I'm desperate for answers. I've also been depressed, and I have a theory that paranormal events are more common where negative energy is predominant. Or am I overthinking, or is this just weird? Could be all three. My true scary story. It was probably the summer of 2010. I was 15 or 16 years old at that time, and me and my neighbors snuck out on a school night to walk around and smoke some joints and cigarettes. Typical rebellious teen stuff. The whole night we told scary stories, but not ghost stories. We talked about a rape that happened in our neighborhood in the 70s, as well as kidnappers, traffickers, and other dark topics. This was all just to scare each other. It's around 1 a.m. and we're walking down a long stretch of street on our way home. Very few street lights and lots of oak trees, so very dark, and it was also slightly raining at this point. A little ahead of us on our left side, the other side of the street, there was a hooded figure coming out of the front of the house. They start walking the same direction we are. Then they cross the street, so that if we continued, we'd walk by them, so we cross the road, and this person crosses back and confronts us. They confront us in the street, under a dim streetlight. To our surprise, when they removed the hood, it was a beautiful red-headed woman, probably late 30s, early 40s. She didn't smell of alcohol, but was probably drugged up. I mean, she seemed aloof and seemed to gaze into my soul in a weird way. Her eyes almost seemed vacant, as if she was indeed behind her eyes, but something was clouding her, so she wasn't truly there. She starts asking us things like, "Why are you out so late? Where do you live? Do your parents know where you are?" And she also tried to make an advance on me and grab me and pull me into her by grabbing my shirt. I was very paranoid and on edge, so I stepped back and I said, "Don't touch me." All of this is happening. A man in a light blue New York Yankees hat is walking down the middle of the suburban street smoking a cigarette. He's coming from the same way we did. He had a purposeful stride and looked intimidating. Probably late 20s. He walked right by us, and brushed right by us. You would have overheard some of her conversation with the lady when he was this close. After we carried on the way we'd been heading, and we told the woman to piss off, we hadn't even taken 10 steps. Turns back around and approaches us. He goes, "What did that woman say to you? What did she tell you?" We reiterated her questions and told him she freaked us out and must be crazy or on drugs, and he just thanked us and chases this woman down. She had begun walking back the way we came from and pulls her back into the house she exited from, all the while she's fighting back against him. I never saw that woman again or the guy, and this happened one street over from my house. Who were they? Why did she approach us? And why did the guy want to know what she said? I didn't sleep a wink that night. It was unsettling, and when it was all going down, I was positive she was like a distraction for the guy to jump us and stick us with a needle or something. We had discussed kidnap kits that night, so that's where my mind was at. I was also aware of this dude far before he was close to us. And I know this may not be scary, but it was certainly strange, and I was unsettled as fuck. Didn't sleep all night, and, well, one thing my friend kept latching onto was we had belongings missing that night. Albeit before we met these two people, weed, cigarettes, and a pipe was what went missing, and just a strange night. One person said she could have been a witch, so I figured this makes the cut for paranormal. According to all of that information, none of this seems even a little bit paranormal. I think everybody knows why the guy asked them the questions he asked. You can put 2 and 4 together. Make 6. How do you tell a detailed paranormal story without sounding fake? I'm genuinely upset. I'm really struggling with something, and I could use some help and maybe just a little bit of kindness. Last night I had a paranormal experience at work. It absolutely terrified me. I decided to share the story to r/paranormal because I've always loved reading the sub and finally had something I thought belonged there. I put a lot of detail into it, well, maybe too much in hindsight. I guess that made it sound fake to some people. I get being skeptical, I really do, but I wasn't expecting the kind of hate I got. I even got hateful DMs telling me to end it, among other things. It was over a ghost story. Don't even know how to explain how upsetting that is. And the story I shared was 100% real to me, and I was the only one in the office late at night because I had to stay late after an OBGYN appointment. I had to get my work done, and I'm on the third floor of like a 75-year-old building that used to be a private home. Now it's just office spaces, but the third floor still feels very much like somebody's old home. Big rooms turned into private offices. And yes, there are federal agents that work in the basement level. It's not some made-up detail. The building has automatic lights. The only lobby, has automatic lights, and only the lobby and my office were lit. Everything else was dark. If there's somebody in those offices, after a while, the lights go off. I shared everything I could remember because I was scared and wanted help understanding what it was I saw. And yes, I mentioned the scent of Calvin Klein Eternity because it mattered. Damn straight. My grandmother wore that perfume religiously since it came out in 1988. It hit me hard when I smelled it. It was a strong hit, and it was personal and unmistakable. I know I'm not a professional writer, and I didn't mean to come off like I was writing creepy pasta. I'm just doing my best to explain something that genuinely shook me. Maybe I kind of wrote too much, or maybe it was the way I described it, but I didn't deserve the level of cruelty I got. So how do you tell a personal story, especially a detailed, emotional one, in a way that feels real and doesn't get dismissed as fake or overly dramatic? I still kind of believe in this community, and I still want to share, but I'm honestly really hurt now and second-guessing myself. If you've ever told a story that people doubted or picked apart, how did you deal with it? Thanks to a few people who were kind, and I appreciate you. A tired, shaken HR rep who just wanted to share something weird that happened. How to make a story more believable? From my experience, the worse you write it, the more believable it can be, and the more either entertaining or frustrating it is for me to read. My imaginary friend was not imaginary. One night my dad could hear me speaking loudly, so he came in to check on me. I was 6 or 7, and he found me at the end of the bed talking to absolutely no one. When he turned the lights on, I got startled and leapt underneath the covers. He asked me who I was talking to. I didn't want to say. I'd been talking to my imaginary friend. He'd asked me to please not tell anybody about him because he didn't want to leave. And I remember clearly seeing him, a blonde kid, green eyes, who told me his name was Y. I tried to be quiet because I didn't want my dad to come back. Once I got caught again, I started keeping a diary where I would communicate by writing my questions and answers so nobody could hear me. Y told me some horrible things about his parents. He said how they were part of something really bad, and he told me that if I looked through the socket in the kitchen above the oven, I would see where they put the ones they helped harm. So I did. My dad walked in on me, and as I'm literally looking through the socket and saw stained glass, like what you'd see in a church or something, he asked me what I was doing, and I got really scared and told him what I saw. He looked, and he saw nothing, reassured me nothing was in the wall. He later found my diary, and it was disturbing. He started asking questions about why and telling, like, there's no need to be afraid of just telling the truth, so I told him. Y told me that bodies are under the house. My dad was genuinely terrified, so he started to research her property. Turns out her home was built over a church graveyard during the Second World War. Never saw or heard from Y again. Well, that's better than finding out you have actual bodies buried underneath your house by a murderer or something. At least to me. Did I see spirits as a kid? To my knowledge, it started when I was 5 or 6. My family and another family were close to where we were having dinner, and after we had finished, our parents wanted to have more drinks. So they let us go out to this grass area across the road. It was a small town, and we knew it very well. We had been taught all about safety already. This grass area was right next to train tracks. They're all mostly fenced. We had been sitting on a bench looking at the crossing because we heard a train coming and wanted to watch it. Right as the train finished going past, a girl around my age appeared in the tracks. I just kind of stared at her, thinking she was another kid from the area. Ended up looking away, and when I looked back, she was gone. A few days later, I saw her again. This time, it was at school. It was around 300 meters away from the tracks. At first, it was just seeing her around town, but then I started seeing her at home, which was a 10-minute drive away. Eventually, we started talking, and everybody around me just assumed she was an imaginary friend. Her name started with an S or a T, I think, and she was 5 or 6. She herself wasn't sure of her age, so I think we just went off of my age. Eventually, she told me how she died. Her family had been waiting to catch a train at the train station, which is now a museum. It's next to that grass area. Her and her sister, a twin I think, had been playing since they got there early, and I think it was the grand opening of the station. They had been playing along the tracks and were oblivious to the dangers of trains. She got hit, and her body got split by the train wheel. Turns out that's why she hated me being anywhere near the tracks. Eventually, I told my dad about her death, and just somehow randomly got brought up, and all I really remember is my dad getting distant after this. I stopped talking about her with other people because of that. When I was in 2nd grade, I was in the classroom with my teacher drawing on the whiteboard, and I was a bit bullied at the time, so she let me stay in the classroom sometimes. At this point, I still hadn't fully really learned what an imaginary friend can and can't do, so when she, being the spirit, draw on the board and the teacher looked and asked what it was, I told her my imaginary friend drew it. Years later, I found out my parents only used the bullying as an excuse to move me, and my teacher had told them she thought I was schizophrenic. I stopped seeing her at some point, but I remember hearing her in 8th grade while I wasn't doing so well mentally. I did look into it, and I found nothing about a child's death when I first got skeptical of my memory. But then I asked a worker at the museum, and she said that there was quite a few deaths along the tracks, and that's why they stopped doing passenger service. She told me she had heard about 3 kids' deaths along the tracks, but that was all probably covered up. She's the main spirit I remember, but there's also a smaller incident where I actually found somebody who matched the incident of the spirit that I was talking to. I was in 3rd or 4th grade. I was on an excursion. We were walking along a footpath right near a beach, and at this point I stopped looking at anybody who might be somebody others don't see. But I guess I accidentally looked too long at one or something because this guy started walking next to me. My friend on the other side of me was oblivious to his presence, so I ignored him, but he just started talking. Apparently, in June of 1994, him and some buddies had been out fishing, even though a storm was coming. They didn't think it would be that bad. None of them survived. I also remember having a weird obsession with drowning after this, and I've always been interested in death. Got my sister to look it up when I got home, and I just told her I had heard something talking about it. It was an actual thing. 6 people died, and from what I found, it wasn't the first time that they had done something like this. One of them had almost drowned in another incident, and everybody knew it was going to happen eventually. Anyway, those are the 2 main incidents I remember. But I do remember seeing people that nobody else did, and my mom, older sister, and older brother all remember that too. I've never asked my dad if he remembered me telling him about the little girl, because we only started getting closer again a few years ago. I don't want to screw that up. Also, something I just remembered to add, my mom had a similar thing as a kid too, and she remembers my grandmother, her mom, saying something about it as well. I don't know much about her. I guess she died when I was 2, but I do know both me and my mom are second daughters, so I don't know if it's a weird genetic thing or something. I'm hearing a honking sound almost every evening outside. I think it all started back when I was about 8 or 9 years old. It was a warm summer evening, and I was outside with my parents all day. Kind of things a little boy loves to do, even if cell phones and tablets were already anchored in my head at the time. The evening was definitely drawing to a close, and I was dead tired, and I was just happy to finally go to sleep. It was easier for me to fall asleep quickly back then. Anyway, I'm lying in bed, and I thought about the day, thinking about all the things I did alone or with my parents, and also about my parents themselves. I don't know what exactly happened that day, but I definitely remember it being so much that I remember that day, but that's when it all started. Lost in my thoughts, I was pulled out of them by a noise outside, and it was a horn. A horn that you usually put on small children's bikes because it's usually more fun for them to draw attention to themselves. I hardly know anybody who has a horn like that. But it's always funny when you hear one, and in any case, I was initially confused when I heard the noise. This high and low tone that came twice in a row. However, I quickly dismissed this horn as a child who simply honked while riding a bike at the kiosk on the opposite side of our house. It was still fairly light at the time, and I could still hear a few voices from there. I fell asleep relatively quickly after that, and didn't think much about the noise anymore. A few days passed, and one evening I'm lying in bed again. It was still light outside, but the kiosk was already closed, and the only noises that could be heard were the cars driving past on the main street. Since the cars were a bit too loud for me and I still had stuffed animals in my bed at the time, I put my teddy bear, who's the same age as me, up to my ear to muffle the sound a little. That way I might be able to fall asleep better. Once again, I'm on the verge of falling asleep, deep in my thoughts. That's when I heard the sound of the horn again. This time I remember the first time, and I called it a stupid coincidence. But now it was weirder. The time just before falling asleep was almost perfect again, and the horn was pressed twice again. I don't know who was down there because I was too tired to look, so I thought to myself, surely a family goes for a walk every evening, and this horn is always honked by a child. And from here on out, I decided to keep an eye on this noise to see if it occurs again, and when it occurs. Keep an ear out, I believe. Unfortunately, I don't know if the horn sounded again between my 9th and 10th birthday, but it started after my 10th birthday. It was late in the evening, and I was supposed to go to bed earlier in order to go back to school tomorrow to be fit. Since I was allowed to download Clash Royale on my iPad mini with my parents' permission, I played instead, easily for 2 hours to get from Arena 1 to Arena 2, or not talking about my skill level, everybody starts somewhere. Anyway, it was past midnight and I was staring warily at the game's home screen. I was ready to go straight to bed. That's when my blood froze in my veins. The horn sounded again, twice again at the same speed, as if somebody copied the same sound and pasted it now. I remembered and immediately stood up and looked outside to see who or what was making that noise. There was no one outside, and there wasn't even cars driving. It was dead silence outside. I didn't know what to do anymore. Slightly shocked, but at the same time so tired that I just fell into bed and didn't think about it anymore. And from that point on, it continued for maybe 5, maybe 6 years. Every evening between 10 p.m. and midnight. Very rarely after midnight. I would hear this horn. Always twice, always the same speed. As if somebody was trying to annoy me and stop me from getting a good night's sleep. I often heard it every evening, but there were often weeks or even months in which I heard it maybe a little bit and sometimes not even at all. What definitely struck me was that it was heard more often during the summer months. Over time, I got used to it. The horn really wasn't that annoying through the closed windows. It could still be clearly heard and raised shudders, and at some point I thought to myself that some kind of friends wanted to say goodnight to me every evening, and a few times even started laughing when the horn sounded. This happened until last year, when our tenant moved out of the apartment above us. They also died of a heart attack shortly afterwards. A new tenant moved in, and from then on the entire cycle changed. Although you could still hear the horn every evening. One evening it happened and the horn suddenly sounded 3 times instead of the usual 2. From that point on, the honking became less and less. I don't know if this mysterious honking has something to do with the house or our former landlady or somebody just having some stupid fun. I miss the honk. It's been a few months since I heard it, and I have a feeling that the 3 honks were a kind of farewell because the appearance became less and less after that. Now you know I'm still waiting for the sound, and I'm 18 now, and it's been haunting me for almost 10 years. I'm not crazy. I hear it, and I've heard it often. But I'll never know who or what caused that honking. Also never told anybody about it, thinking it would be maybe considered as my fantasy.